In 1963, Henry Ford tried to buy Ferrari. Enzo signed nothing, stood up, and walked out to lunch, leaving the most powerful car company on earth humiliated. So Henry Ford II gave an order, 5 words long: beat his ass at Le Mans. This is the story of the car he built to do it. 210 miles per hour, 40 inches from the ground. 4 straight Le Mans victories against the team that had won 9 in a row, the Ford GT40. Ford Motor Company was not a racing organization. It made practical cars for practical people: Falcons, Galaxies, Mustangs. Millions of them every year, bought by working Americans who needed reliable transportation. The biggest car company in the world by revenue and the most invisible in European motorsport. Le Mans was a different world. 24 hours, 10,000 kilometers, on public roads in northwestern France, no runoff, barriers close, crowds hundreds deep along the circuit. Not a race so much as a test of everything at once: speed, reliability, engineering, strategy, human endurance. The manufacturer who won Le Mans was the manufacturer that mattered. And through the early 1960s, every single year without exception, that manufacturer was Ferrari. 6 in a row. Testarossa, 250 GTO, 275p, 330p, one after another across the line, while the rest of the world watched and quietly concluded the gap to Ferrari might simply be unbridgeable. Ford set out to bridge it, not out of passion, out of humiliation, and here's what actually happened in Maranello. The deal was real. Months of meetings. Enzo needed the money. Ford needed the prestige. It was nearly done. Then Enzo read one clause: any increase in his racing budget would need sign-off from Detroit. To a man who answered to no one about his cars, that was the insult. He turned to his secretary, said, "Let's get something to eat," and the deal died at the table. The Ford delegation flew home with nothing and handed their chairman a humiliation he would spend tens of millions of dollars to repay. Roy Lunn got the call first. A British engineer running Ford's advanced vehicle department, Lunn had worked on Aston Martin's Le Mans program back in 1949 and understood endurance racing in a way most of Ford's executives did not. His brief was simple and almost impossible: design a car that can win Le Mans in under a year. His answer was the GT40. The name came from the car's defining characteristic: it stood exactly 40 inches high at the roofline. Not a styling decision, a physics decision. Lower center of gravity, less frontal area, less drag, less lift. The car would be so close to the ground that at racing speed, the air trying to get under it would push it down rather than lift it. In theory. Eric Broadley joined as chief engineer, designer of the Lola GT, the most technically advanced British racing car of its era, a man who had already thought harder about mid-engine prototype construction than almost anyone alive. John Wyer, who had managed the Aston Martin Le Mans program and brought Le Mans winning experience, came on as race manager. The first cars were built at Ford Advanced Vehicles in Slough, England, in a facility that was simultaneously cutting-edge and chaotic, staffed by people building a world-class endurance racer for the first time in their careers. The engine was a Ford 5.8, a 289 cubic inch unit producing around 380 horsepower, adapted from Ford's road car program. Mid-mounted, driving the rear wheels through a Colati transaxle gearbox. The chassis was a steel semi-monocoque, the body in fiberglass, the whole thing designed to be as light as possible while surviving the structural loads of racing at Le Mans speed. On paper, it looked right. On a test track, it looked fast. Then they ran it up to 170 miles per hour in the front, lifted, not slightly, not disconcertingly, lifted in a way that made the car fundamentally unsafe at the speeds Le Mans demanded. The Mulsanne straight required 200 plus miles per hour, sustained for over 30 seconds per lap, lap after lap for 24 hours. A car that generated lift at 170 miles per hour had no business there. The aerodynamic science that would later produce downforce as a routine engineering tool did not yet exist in any practical form. Nobody fully understood why certain shapes at certain speeds pushed a car up rather than down. The GT40 looked aerodynamically correct and was aerodynamically dangerous. They modified what they could, added a small lip to the nose, adjusted the rear, ran more tests, got the instability threshold up, went to Le Mans anyway. June 1964. Ford's first Le Mans. Phil Hill, former Formula One world champion, qualified the GT40 and set the fastest lap of the entire race. The car was quick, genuinely quick. On the Mulsanne, the GT40 was visibly pulling away from Ferrari's latest prototypes on the long straight. The speed advantage was real. 12 hours in, all three Ford GT40s were retired. Gearbox failures, the Colati transaxle, not designed for the sustained torque loads of a 380 horsepower engine running flat out for hours at a time, had simply broken. Suspension failures, brake failures. The precision that endurance racing demanded every component surviving not 1 hour but 24 wasn't there. Ferrari won its 7th consecutive Le Mans. In Detroit, the embarrassment was complete. Carroll Shelby was brought in to fix it. Shelby had won Le Mans himself as a driver for Aston Martin in 1959, which meant he had beaten Ferrari at their own race. He had since built the AC Cobra, a car that was destroying Ferrari and GT racing globally, winning championships that Ferrari's GTO had previously owned outright. He understood the specific demands of Le Mans in ways that Ford's corporate engineering culture did not, and he had spent enough time around Enzo Ferrari to understand what beating him required. Shelby's first major decision was the engine. The 289 cubic inch V8 was not going to beat Ferrari's latest prototypes. Not enough power, not enough torque. The answer was sitting in Ford's own product line, the 427 cubic inch 7.0-liter V8 from the Galaxy. A NASCAR-derived unit originally built for oval racing, where reliability under sustained maximum load was the defining requirement. Not a precision European racing engine. An American bulldozer, 485 horsepower, enormous torque, and built from the start to run flat out for hours without braking. Roy Lunn at Carcraft Ford's new dedicated motorsport division ran the calculations, 15 seconds per lap faster at Le Mans. In a race decided by margins of minutes over 24 hours, 15 seconds per lap was not an improvement. It was a different race. Getting the 427 into the GT40's limited mid-engine compartment required engineering that bordered on violence. The engine and all its associated cooling, oiling, and fuel systems had to be packaged into a space that hadn't been designed for them. The gearbox the Colati unit had failed catastrophically was replaced with a ZF 5-speed unit, stronger, more reliable, designed to handle the torque the 427 produced. The aerodynamics were revisited with a deeper front spoiler and revised rear bodywork to address the lift problem that had made the original car dangerous. The new car was called the Mark II. When Ken Miles first drove it on Ford's test track in late 1965, he hit 210 miles per hour on the straight. He came back to the pits, got out of the car, and told Shelby it wasn't enough. He wanted more. Ken Miles. Born in Sutton Coldfield, Birmingham, 1918, Tank Corps Sergeant in the Second World War. Emigrated to California in 1952, built racing cars in his garage and won with them. Joined Shelby American in 1963 as chief development driver. By 1965, the most important test and development driver in American motorsport, his gift was not just speed, though he was fast, consistently, in any car he drove. His gift was translation. He could drive a car to the limit, feel precisely what it was doing at that limit, and come back and explain it in engineering terms specific enough to fix it. Most fast drivers can tell you a car is oversteering. Ken Miles could tell you which corner of the car, at what speed, under what load conditions, what the tire was doing at that moment, and what suspension geometry change would correct it. He was a driver and an engineer simultaneously, in a body that could sustain 200 miles per hour for hours at a time. Jerry Titus, a driver who worked alongside him, said Miles had as much, if not more, road racing savvy than any other man on this continent possesses. Shelby said, Ken was the greatest test driver in the world. Ford's Le Mans committee didn't like him. Too opinionated, too resistant to direction from people he considered less knowledgeable than himself, which was most people. Too British, his Birmingham accent undiminished by 13 years in California, his crew nicknaming him Teddy Teabag for the tea he drank, and Sidebite for the way he talked out of the corner of his mouth. Ford's PR department wanted clean-cut American faces for their marketing materials. Miles was not that. What Miles was the reason the GT40 became a winning car rather than an expensive failure. Le Mans. The Mark II GT40S arrived with the 7.0-liter V8, and everything Ford had learned from 1964, faster in a straight line than anything Ferrari had brought. More reliable in theory than the previous year's cars. For the first few hours, it looked like Ford's race. The Mark IIs were genuinely pulling away from the Ferrari 275 P2S on the Mulsanne. The sound of the liter V8, audible across the circuit as something categorically different from the European engines around it, deeper, more violent, an American engine in a French race, making no apology for what it was. Then the gearboxes failed, then the brakes, then other components, one after another, in the methodical way that Le Mans exposes every weakness a car carries into the race. Every Ford GT40 entered in the 196524 hours of Le Mans retired. Ferrari won its 9th consecutive Le Mans victory. Henry Ford II handed Leo Beebe, head of Ford Public Relations and Racing, a business card. 3 words: "You better win." The preparation for 1966 was unlike anything Le Mans had seen. 100 Ford personnel deployed to the circuit, 9 GT40s entered, 21 tons of spare parts flown in from America, multiple fully prepared spare engines for every car. The aerodynamic development that had been running continuously since the 1964 race had produced a car that was now stable at over 220 miles per hour. The lift problem that had made the original car dangerous was solved progressively through hundreds of hours of testing, most of them with Miles at the wheel. The 427 V8 had been further refined and was now producing 485 horsepower with a reliability that earlier in 1966 had been validated under race conditions. Miles had won the Daytona 24 Hours, then Sebring. He was on the verge of something no driver had ever achieved, the triple crown of American endurance racing, winning Daytona, Sebring, and Le Mans in a single season. No driver in history had done it. If Miles won at Le Mans, he would be the only man ever. Ferrari arrived with 11 cars, the new 330 P3, purpose-built to answer everything Ford had shown in 1965. 250,000 spectators filled the grandstands. Henry Ford II was in the paddock in person. His business card had said, "You better win." His presence said it louder. The race started at 4 p.m. on June 18th. Drivers running across the track to their cars in the traditional Le Mans start. Miles jogged to his number 1 car, buckled in, fired the 7.0 liter V8, that unmistakable American sound, deep and violent, and went. The opening hours were a genuine battle. Ferrari's 330 P3 was fast and had been developed specifically to counter the Mark II. Ford had the straight-line advantage. The GT40s were pulling 210 miles per hour down the Mulsanne, leaving the Ferraris visibly behind on the long run. But Ferrari had the experience, the strategic depth of 9 consecutive Le Mans victories, the knowledge of exactly how to manage a car across 24 hours on this specific circuit in ways that no amount of money could simply buy. Through the first afternoon and evening, the lead changed. Ford pushed. Ferrari responded. The crowd along the circuit got what they had come for, a genuine fight between the most powerful racing program in America and the most experienced team in Europe. Then night fell, and it rained. The rain came in around midnight, heavy, cold, persistent, and changed everything. Ferrari's 330 P3 had been set up for dry conditions, lower ride height, suspension optimized for the consistent grip of a dry Le Mans surface. In the wet, that optimization became a liability. The Ferrari cars became unpredictable in the standing water on the circuit's public road sections, overworking their tires, trying to find grip that the setup wasn't designed to deliver in these conditions. One by one through the night, the Ferrari 330 P3s failed. Gearbox issues, engine failures after the thermal shock of cold, wet running followed by sudden full-power acceleration. The fragility that had destroyed Ford in 1964 and 1965 had not disappeared from racing, it had simply migrated. And in the rain at Le Mans in 1966, it lived inside Ferrari's cars. Miles drove through it, smooth, precise, the GT40 7.0 liter V8, running with a consistency that the hundreds of development hours had produced. By Sunday morning, Ford was running 1-2-3. The highest placed Ferrari was 8th overall. The gap between them was not seconds or minutes, it was 47 laps. The race was won. The question was, by how much? Miles and Holm were leading in the number 1 car. The team issued the slowdown signal from lap times in the low 3-minute 30s to a conservative 4 minutes flat. Miles followed it, running at a pace that could be sustained indefinitely, the Triple Crown within reach. Then Leo Beebe, head of Ford Racing Operations, had an idea. A 1-2-3 photo finish. All 3 Ford cars crossing the line together in tight formation for the perfect image. Every newspaper, front page, every magazine, a decade of advertising, the visual proof of total domination. Miles was leading by too wide a margin for a photo finish unless he slowed significantly. The instruction came through. Reduce pace, let the other cars close, cross together. Miles slowed. He had spent 3 years building this car. He had won Daytona and Sebring that year. The Triple Crown was there, and his employer was asking him to slow down for a photograph in the final hour of a 24-hour race that was already won. He did it, because that was the deal, because Ford had asked him to. What nobody at Ford had checked was a detail buried in the regulations. The 24 hours of Le Mans was not decided by who crossed the finish line first. It was decided by who had covered the greatest total distance across 24 hours. Because the three GT40s had started at different grid positions, they had covered marginally different total distances. The car that had started furthest back, McLaren and Eamon's number 2, had covered 8 meters more than Miles and Hume's number 1. 8 meters. Decided by where you had been sitting on the starting grid the previous afternoon. McLaren and Eamon were declared the winners. Miles finished second. Miles got out of the car. His crew heard him say, "I think we've been F-ed." He had given up a certain victory and the only triple crown in American endurance racing history for a corporate photograph. And then the rules had quietly handed the photograph's victory to someone else while keeping the result. Carroll Shelby said afterwards, "I felt wonderful about us winning 1, 2, and 3 in 66, but Ken Miles, we made a horrible decision. It was good politically for Ford, and I'm not going to go against Henry Ford." Henry Ford II stood in the paddock and looked at 3 GT40s crossing the line in formation. Ferrari 8th. 47 laps down, 9 consecutive Le Mans victories ended. Completely, publicly, on Ferrari's own ground, he had beaten Enzo Ferrari's ass exactly as he had commanded. Ken Miles flew home to California. 3 months later, August 17th, 1966, Miles was testing the J car at Riverside Raceway, the next generation GT40, lighter, faster, built on lessons from everything that had come before. At 200 miles per hour on a banked section, the car went straight on. It launched off the banking. It rolled 3 times. On the 3rd rotation, it ejected its driver. Ken Miles died at the circuit, 47 years old. More than 400 people attended his funeral, including Shelby and most of the engineers who had worked alongside Miles for 3 years. He had never won Le Mans. He had developed the car that won it. He had been Ford's fastest driver in 1966. He had slowed down for a photograph. He had gone back to work on the next car, and the next car killed him. Ford won Le Mans again in 1967. Dan Gurney and A.J. Foyt in the Mark IV, a fully American design built at Carcraft. At the finish, Gurney sprayed champagne over his crew. Nobody had ever done that before at Le Mans. A tradition that has defined motorsport victory celebrations in every series, at every level, ever since born in that moment, partly to celebrate a win, partly to honor the man who had made the program possible and had never lived to see it complete. The J car that killed Miles had been revised after his death, its cockpit reinforced. At the 1967 race, that reinforced structure allowed Mario Andretti to walk away from a major accident that might otherwise have been fatal. Miles's death had made the next car safer. A private team, JW Automotive, run by John Wyer, there from the very beginning entered an older Mk1 GT40 without factory support. Won the GT40 winning Le Mans without Ford's involvement. Jackie Ickx walked to his car at the start while every other driver ran. His protest against a start format he considered dangerous made visible to 250,000 people. He then drove one of the greatest races of his life, trading the overall lead with Hans Hermann's Porsche 908 for the final 2 hours, catching Hermann on the final lap, passing him on the final straight, winning by 120 meters across 24 hours. 4 consecutive Le Mans victories against the team that had won 9 in a row. 107 GT40s built across all variants. The name never officially registered when Ford tried to revive it for the modern GT in the early 2000s. Someone else owned the trademark. The car sold as the Ford GT. The originals regularly exceed 10 million euros at auction. Enzo Ferrari sold his company to Fiat in 1969, the same year the GT40 won Le Mans for the 4th time. Henry Ford II had gone to Le Mans. He had beaten his ass 4 times, but the man who built the weapon never got his victory. Ken Miles crossed the line second, flew home, went back to work, because that was what you did. Carroll Shelby, decades later, was asked about Ken Miles. I miss him every day.